In medieval England, if you were accused of a crime, they'd make you grab a red-hot iron bar and walk 3 steps. Your burned hand would then be bandaged, and if it healed cleanly after 3 days, congratulations, God thought you were innocent. If it festered, well, hope you enjoyed having hands, because you were about to lose one. Alright, before the story, if you're here regularly, subscribe helps me out. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and the time. Yesterday, someone from Portugal said they listen while cooking dinner, and someone from Chicago was using it for a morning commute. Wild. We're heading to medieval England in a minute. First though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Not just one smell, but a symphony of them. Sharp wood smoke, sour, unwashed bodies, the musty reek of damp straw, and the unmistakable punch of animal dung. Your eyes crack open to dim grey light filtering through a single small window, just a hole in the wall, really, covered with a scrap of stretched bladder skin instead of glass. You're not alone. The soft breathing and occasional grunt tells you that even before your eyes adjust enough to make out the shapes, your family, all of them, are packed around you on the packed earth floor. And not just your family. In the corner, something large shifts and snorts. The pig. Of course the pig is inside. It's winter and you need the body heat. The cold hits next, wrapping around your face like a wet cloth. Your breath forms little clouds that hang in the air before dissolving. The single ember in the central hearth has nearly died, and someone needs to bring it back to life before everyone freezes to death. That someone, naturally, is you. Wake up, a voice croaks nearby. Your mother. She doesn't need to say more. In the 13th century English winter, you're always one careless morning away from disaster. A dead fire means no warmth, no cooking, and potentially no survival. You force yourself upright, your back complaining after a night on the straw-stuffed sack you call a mattress. Something tickles across your arm. Just a flea, one of your many roommates. You've stopped noticing them most of the time, the same way you've stopped noticing the constant itch of your rough wool clothing, which you've been wearing day and night since October. Or fire's nearly out, you mutter, though no one needs the update. You stumble to the hearth, nearly tripping over your little brother, who's curled up closest to where the warmth used to be. Carefully, you pick up the small iron pot that contains last night's ember, protected all night to preserve this most precious resource. Starting a fire from scratch isn't impossible, but it's time-consuming and difficult. Time and energy you can't spare when the day's work is already looming. You feed the ember bits of dried moss and the smallest splinters of wood, gently blowing life back into the orange glow. The process is almost meditative, a ritual your hands know by heart, even as your mind slowly climbs out of sleep. When a small flame finally catches, something in your chest loosens. One more day where your family won't freeze to death, at least not from lack of trying. The smoke rises toward the hole in the thatched roof designed to let it escape. Most of it does. Some doesn't, filling the single room with a grey haze that makes your eyes water. But the smoke is also a blessing. It helps keep the insects at bay, and even preserves the thatch itself, coating everything in a protective layer of soot. Get the water, your mother says, already kneading yesterday's dough that was left to rise overnight. The precious grain was ground at the Lord's mill. For a fee, of course, always a fee. You grab the wooden bucket and steel yourself for the cold as you push open the door, its leather hinges creaking in protest. The blast of winter air feels like a slap, but you're moving now, heading toward the village well. Outside, the sky is just beginning to lighten, a murky pre-dawn grey. Yours isn't the only column of smoke rising into the winter air. The entire village is waking up, 23 households of serfs all bound to the same patch of land, all owing service to the same lord, whose manor house sits on the small hill overlooking your lives. The mud of the village path has frozen overnight, making footing treacherous. One bad fall and you could break something. A broken leg or arm in winter is a death sentence when you need to work every day just to survive. No work means no food. No food means death. It's that simple. Morning, grunts old Edwin as you pass. He's already butchering a scrawny chicken, his gnarled hands working with practiced efficiency despite the cold. Blood stains the snow around his wooden block, shockingly red against the white. Life is blood and dirt out here, no use pretending otherwise. Hard freeze last night, he adds unnecessarily. Morning, you reply. Any news from the travellers? Edwin's son is married to a girl from the next village over, making his house a rare connection to the outside world. News travels slowly in medieval England, carried by peddlers, pilgrims, and the occasional royal messenger. Heard the sheriff caught them poachers from Blackwood, Edwin says, his knife never stopping its work. They're to face the ordeal tomorrow. You suppress a shudder. Everyone knows what that means. The church might have officially banned trial by ordeal back in 1215, but in remote villages like yours, the old ways die hard. Those men will either plunge their arms into boiling water or carry burning iron. Their flesh will sizzle and their screams will echo, all to determine if God thinks them innocent or guilty. Poor bastards, you mutter. Poaching the king's deer is a serious crime, but a hungry family is a powerful motivator. You reach the well where a small crowd has already gathered. Nearly froze solid, says Anne, the tanner's wife. William had to break the ice with an axe. The village well is the centre of gossip and social life even in winter. As you wait your turn, you listen to the flow of information. Who's sick? Who's fighting? Who's been caught doing what they shouldn't? In a village of less than 100 souls, privacy is an unknown concept. When your turn comes, you lower the bucket. The rope burns your cold hands. Another small pain in a life full of them. The water, when you pull it up, has slivers of ice floating on top. Walking back is harder with the heavy bucket. The water sloshes, occasionally spilling over to freeze almost instantly on your chapped hands. By the time you make it back to your hut, your fingers are numb claws. Inside, the fire has grown, and the one-room dwelling feels almost warm by comparison. Your father is up now, fixing the loose binding on his scythe. He nods at the water, but says nothing. Words are often scarce in the morning. There's too much to do. Your mother takes some of the water for the morning pottage, a thick porridge of oats and dried peas. It's what you eat most days, sometimes with a bit of salted pork if you're lucky. Today looks like it will be just pottage, plain, filling, and keeping starvation at arm's length for one more day. While it cooks, you help your younger sister milk the family's most prized possession, an elderly goat that somehow produces enough milk to supplement your diet. The goat is tethered in the corner opposite the pig, equally unhappy about the living arrangements, but too valuable to house outside where wolves or thieves might get it. She's giving less, your sister whispers, her small hands working the teats with practiced efficiency. Do you think she's sick? You examine the goat's eyes, looking for signs of illness. A sick goat could mean disaster. No, just old and cold, you reply, hoping you're right. We'll give her extra hay today. The hay itself is a precious resource, carefully stored in the small lean-to attached to your hut. Every blade represents hours of summer labour with the scythe, the drying, the storing. Nothing is wasted when winter starvation is always just one bad decision away. By now, the hut has filled with the smell of cooking pottage. Your stomach growls loudly enough for your mother to hear, earning you a sympathetic glance. The hunger is always worst in the morning before the first meal takes the edge off. Go check the snares before we eat, your father says, finally breaking his silence. Might be lucky. It's not a suggestion. You grab your cloak, little more than a rough rectangle of homespun wool with a hole for your head, and head back into the cold. The family has 4 snares set in the woodland edge, a small concession from the Lord who otherwise forbids hunting in his forests. Snares can catch rabbits, squirrels, or if you're especially fortunate, a pheasant. Meat is rare in winter, and even a squirrel would make the day's pottage significantly more nourishing. The walk to the snares takes you past the village church, a stone structure that puts all the wooden and wattle and daub homes to shame. Even at this early hour, the priest is outside, his breath clouding as he speaks with the village reeve, the man responsible for ensuring everyone completes their required labour for the Lord. 2 days of labour owed before the month's end, the reeve is saying. The Lord wants the new storage pit dug before spring. You keep your head down as you pass. Extra labour service means less time to tend your family's strips of land, which means less food come harvest time. It's a delicate balance, always teetering on the edge of not enough. The woodland is silent under its coating of frost, your footsteps crunching loudly with each step. You check the first 3 snares, empty. Your heart sinks a little lower with each one. At the 4th, you stop short, a small burst of elation rising in your chest. A rabbit, its white winter coat, stained red where the snare caught it, hangs limply from the twisted cord. "Thank you," you whisper, though you're not sure if you're thanking God, the rabbit, or just blind luck. You quickly reset the snare and tuck the rabbit into your cloak. Its body is still slightly warm. The village is fully awake when you return, smoke rising from every dwelling. Children are carrying water, women are grinding grain in hand querns for the daily bread that will go into the communal oven later, and men are gathering tools for the day's labour. Medieval life waits for no one. The moment dawn breaks, work begins. Inside your hut, the rabbit is received with muted celebration. No one speaks their relief out loud. That would be tempting fate, but your mother's hands move quickly as she skins and guts the animal, setting aside the valuable fur and adding chunks of meat to the pottage. "Hide the bones when you're done," your father reminds everyone unnecessarily. Waste is both a sin and a luxury you cannot afford. The bones will become broth, the fur will be cured and sewn into something useful, the sinew will strengthen thread. An entire economy of scarcity dictates that nothing goes unused. The family gathers around the cooking pot. Father, mother, you, your younger sister, your 2 small brothers, and the ancient grandmother who rarely speaks but whose gnarled hands never stop working, even now spinning wool into thread as she waits for food. The eldest brother is missing, sent to be a labourer at the monastery 2 villages over. You haven't seen him since harvest time. Your mother ladles the steaming pottage into wooden bowls, 1 for each person. The portions are small, but the rabbit makes the thin porridge rich with fat and protein. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, letting the warmth spread through your body. For this brief moment, the constant worry about food subsides. John Cooper's boy is feverish, your mother says between careful bites. The red spots came yesterday. A heavy silence falls. Everyone knows what that means. The spotted fever takes children quickly, spreading from house to house like an evil spirit. Your father makes the sign of the cross, and your mother touches the small pouch of protective herbs hanging around her neck. "Keep away from their house," she tells the younger children. It's the only medicine they know. Distance from the sick. That and prayers. When the meal is finished, your father stands, his frame filling the small space. Despite the constant labour and occasional hunger, he's a strong man. He has to be to survive. To the fields, he says. We need to check the drainage ditches after the snow. You nod, already dreading the cold, wet work ahead. The strips of land allocated to your family lie scattered among the great open fields surrounding the village. In this season, they look barren and lifeless, but beneath the frozen soil, the winter wheat sleeps, your family's hope for the coming year. Before leaving, you help bank the fire carefully, preserving the embers for the evening's return. Your mother will keep it fed throughout the day as she works on indoor tasks with your sister and grandmother. Mind the north field ditch, she tells your father. Flooded bad last thaw. He nods, and you follow him out into the full light of morning. The sun has finally broken through, painting the frost-covered village in blinding white brilliance. For a moment, it's beautiful enough to make you forget the cold, the hunger, the constant work. Then a blast of wind cuts through your inadequate clothing and reality returns. Other men and older boys are heading to the fields too, carrying spades and picks for clearing the drainage ditches that keep the precious fields from turning into useless swamps come spring. You pass the village smithy, already hot with his morning fire, the rhythmic ping of his hammer marking time like a heartbeat. Think it'll snow again? You ask your father as you walk. Small talk is rare, practical communication being the norm, but the beauty of the morning has loosened something in you. He glances at the sky, reading the clouds with the expertise of a man whose life depends on weather. Yes, he says simply. Tonight. Heavy. You digest this information with a frown. Heavy snow means the drainage work is even more important. It also means tomorrow will be harder in every way. As you reach the edge of the village, the manor house comes fully into view atop its small hill. Stone-built and 2 stories tall, it represents a level of comfort and security so far beyond your experience it might as well be a castle in a storyteller's tale. Smoke rises from multiple chimneys, real chimneys, not just holes in the roof. The Lord's family will be eating meat today, and tomorrow, and the day after. They'll be warm, their work will be optional. Your father sees you looking. Eyes down, son, he warns quietly. Envy's a sin, and it doesn't warm your belly neither. You nod and turn away from the manor, facing the open fields that demand your labour. The sun climbs higher as you walk, but brings little warmth with it. The medieval winter has settled in for a long stay, and you'll face each day of it the same way. One task at a time, one meal at a time, one breath at a time. Survival isn't something you think about as a concept. It's just what you do. Every decision, from banking the fire to setting snares to fixing drainage ditches, is part of the endless work of staying alive in a world where nature and society seem equally determined to make that difficult. As you reach the first drainage ditch and plunge your spade into the half-frozen mud, you don't complain. The work is hard, but it's necessary, and necessity is the master you serve most faithfully, even more than the lord on the hill, or the king in his distant castle, or the god in his even more distant heaven. Your back already aching, you glance at the position of the sun. The day has barely begun. Hours of labour stretch ahead before you can return to the small comfort of your smoky hut. But that's life in medieval England, a constant negotiation with hunger, cold and exhaustion. You dig deeper into the frozen earth, your breath clouding in the winter air. The drainage ditch is half frozen, half mud, the worst possible combination. Your wooden spade, a treasured tool handed down from your grandfather, chips away at the ice while your feet slowly sink into the muck beneath. Your father works 10 paces ahead, his rhythm never faltering despite the cold that makes your fingers feel like useless sausages attached to your hands. Deeper there, he calls without looking back. Water'll pool if you don't clear it proper. You grunt in acknowledgement, too cold for words. The wind cuts across the open field like a knife, finding every gap in your clothing. No matter how many layers of wool and linen you wrap yourself in, the medieval winter always finds a way in. Hey, you there. The voice makes you flinch. It belongs to Walter, the manor's reeve, the man who ensures the Lord's work gets done by people like you. Selected from among the villagers but loyal to the Lord, the reeve walks a difficult line. Today he looks annoyed. You're needed at the new storage pit, he says, pointing toward the far field where a group of men are already digging. Lord's orders, 4 men from each family. Your father straightens, wincing as his back protests. We're clearing drainage, he says, gesturing to the ditch. Spring floods will ruin the seed if... Lord's orders, Walter repeats, cutting him off. Storage pit first, your strips second. Send the boy. And just like that your day changes. No arguments, no negotiations. You are a serf, bound to this land and to the Lord who controls it. Your labour isn't your own. Go on, your father says quietly. He'll now have to finish the drainage work alone, work meant for 2 or 3 men. You follow Walter across the frost-hardened field, joining a sombre line of other men and boys being gathered from their own necessary tasks. No one speaks much as you walk. Complaining is pointless and potentially dangerous if it reaches the wrong ears. The new storage pit is an ambitious project, a massive hole being dug into the earth where the Lord can store grain away from rats, weather, and hungry peasants. The existing pit has served for decades, but the Lord wants more capacity, which means you'll be breaking your back digging frozen soil instead of protecting your family's food supply. The group of workers at the pit has swelled to nearly 30 men by the time you arrive. You recognise faces from your village and the next one over, Thomas with his missing front teeth, young Henry who got married last spring, old Edwin's middle son whose name you always forget. 3 more spans deeper, 2 wider, instructs the Lord's steward, a thin man who's never lifted a farming tool in his life but knows exactly how much work a peasant should accomplish in a day. The Lord inspects at midday. You're handed a pick, heavier than your spade, and awkward in your cold hands. The pit is already impressive, a gaping wound in the earth nearly 6 feet deep at the centre. You find a spot along the edge and begin the mind-numbing work of breaking the frozen ground. The repetitive swing of the pick becomes almost meditative after a while. Lift, swing, crack. Lift, swing, crack. Your mind wanders even as your body works. You think about the rabbit from this morning, how the meat enriched the pottage. You think about the spotted fever in the Cooper household, and silently pray it won't spread. You think about the storage pit you're digging and how little of the grain it will hold will ever pass your lips. Heard about the trial tomorrow? Thomas asks during a brief pause to catch your breath. He's working beside you, his pick rising and falling in the same rhythm as yours. The poachers? You reply, remembering Edwin's news. Thomas nods, leaning closer. My cousin's married to the miller's daughter. She says they caught 3 men from Blackwood with 2 of the king's deer, but one of them is the blacksmith's nephew, so they're giving him the ordeal instead of hanging him outright. Which ordeal, you ask, though you're not sure you want to know. Hot iron, Thomas says, with grim fascination. 3 steps with it burning in their palms. The priest'll bless it first, make sure God's judgment is true. You've never seen an ordeal by hot iron, though you've heard the screams once when you were younger. The memory makes your stomach clench. They deserve it, says another man working nearby. Robert, a fervent churchgoer known for his rigid views. King's deer are king's deer. God's law and king's law both say stealing's a sin. Easy to say when your belly's full, mutters Thomas, too quietly for Robert to hear. You stay silent. Opinions on justice are dangerous things to share openly. The conversation shifts to safer topics. The weather, predictions for spring planting, whose daughter might marry whose son when summer comes. The work continues as the sun climbs higher, offering little warmth but marking the passage of time. Your arms burn with fatigue, your back screams with every swing of the pick, but you don't stop. No one stops until the steward calls for a brief rest at mid-morning. The break lasts only long enough to drink some water and chew a crust of bread that you've brought wrapped in a scrap of cloth. Some men have nothing and simply sit, conserving energy. You share your small crust with Thomas, who nods gratefully. "Lord's coming," someone hisses, and everyone scrambles to their feet. The lord of the manor approaches on horseback, the massive beast steaming in the cold air. Unlike you in your rough wool and patched linen, the lord wears furs and fine woolen cloth dyed a deep blue, a colour so expensive that your entire family couldn't afford a scrap of it the size of your palm. He surveys the pit with a critical eye, saying nothing as the steward points out the progress. To him, you are all interchangeable parts of his estate, no more worthy of individual recognition than the trees in his forest or the stones in his manor walls. "Deeper," is all he says, before turning his horse and riding back toward the warmth of his hall. The steward's face hardens. "You heard him," he barks. "Back to work. No more breaks until midday." And so you dig. The sun continues its arc and the pit grows deeper, wider, your muscles burning beyond pain into a dull, constant throb. This is the reality of medieval labour, backbreaking, endless, and utterly necessary for the survival of everyone, from the lowest serf to the lord himself. Without these storage pits, without the fields you farm and the drainage ditches you dig, everyone would starve. "My father told me," Thomas says, during a brief pause to remove a large stone, that his grandfather remembered the Great Famine, 3 years of rain, crops rotted in the fields, said people ate bark off trees and boiled leather to make soup. You've heard the stories too, passed down as warnings. The famine of 1315, 1317 killed thousands. Whole villages disappeared. The old folks say the dead were buried in mass graves because no one had the strength to dig individual ones. Such catastrophes remain a constant fear, lurking just one bad harvest away. "My grandmother said they ate cats," adds Henry with macabre fascination, "even rats when it got bad enough." "That's nothing," says an older man named Will, pausing in his digging. "My uncle was in London during the bad years, said he saw a woman tried for stealing a baby to eat it." A heavy silence falls over your section of the pit. Such tales would be dismissed as dark fantasy in better times, but everyone knows hunger drives people to unimaginable acts. You've never been that hungry, not quite, but you've seen hunger's shadow during late winter, when the stores run low. You've felt its claws in your belly during the hungry gap of early spring when winter stores are depleted and new crops aren't ready. "They executed her?" someone finally asks. Will nods grimly. "Burned her. Said eating Christian flesh made her a witch." No one comments further. The conversation has ventured into the territory of nightmares. The picks and spades resume their rhythm, punctuating the heavy silence. Midday finally arrives, announced by the distant church bell. The steward reluctantly calls a halt, allowing you to rest and eat whatever meagre lunch you've brought. For you, it's a small bundle containing a hard crust of bread and an onion, luxury compared to some years. You find a relatively dry spot at the edge of the pit and sit with Thomas and a few others from your village. The food disappears quickly, barely taking the edge off your hunger. No one speaks much as they eat. Conservation of energy is instinctive when you live close to the edge of survival. As you finish your last bite, a commotion from the direction of the village catches your attention. A group of men are marching down the road, surrounding three figures with their hands bound. "The poachers," Thomas whispers, excitement and dread mixing in his voice. "They're taking them to the church to hold them for tomorrow's ordeal." Everyone stands to watch the grim procession. Even from a distance, you can see the fear on the captives' faces. Three ordinary men who made the desperate choice to hunt the king's deer and now must face the judgment of both man and God. The manor's bailiff leads the group, his position of authority clear from his better clothing and the swagger in his walk. Behind him, 4 men-at-arms, rare in your small corner of England, surround the prisoners. Such a show of force for 3 hungry poachers seems excessive, until you remember that poaching isn't just theft. It's a challenge to the very order of society. If men can take the king's deer without consequence, what else might they take? "Know any of them?" you ask Thomas, whose connections through his cousin sometimes give him better information. He squints at the distant figures. The tall one's Will Fletcher from Blackwood, makes arrows, has 5 children. Other 2 I don't recognise. The procession disappears behind the church, and gradually the workers turn back to their task. The break is over, though no one has officially called for work to resume. In the medieval world, time is measured by the sun and the church bells, but labour is measured by what needs doing, not by hours. You climb back into the pit, your muscles protesting after the brief rest. The afternoon stretch is always the hardest. Fatigue building on fatigue, cold seeping deeper into your bones. But you keep working. Everyone does. The choice is as simple as it is brutal. Work or starve. "My father was called as a witness once," says Henry, as the digging resumes. "For a trial by combat. Said it was the most terrible thing he ever saw." Trial by combat. Another form of ordeal where opponents fight to the death or surrender, the victor presumed to have God's favour. Like trial by fire or water, it places judgment in divine hands. Unlike those trials, it makes a spectacle of violence that can last hours. "Who fought?" someone asks. "A knight accused of stealing another knight's wife," Henry says. "The husband challenged him. They fought with swords for nearly 2 hours before the challenger lost his footing and got a blade through his throat." "And the wife?" asks Thomas. Henry shrugs. "Given to the victor, I suppose. That's how it works for nobles." The conversation shifts to other tales of justice. Some witnessed, others merely heard. A woman ducked in the pond for scolds. A man forced to walk barefoot through the village carrying the sheep he stole. A child beaten publicly for stealing apples from the priest tree. Justice in medieval England is rarely private and never gentle. It serves as both punishment and warning, a public spectacle designed to reinforce the consequences of stepping outside the rigid social and legal boundaries. By mid-afternoon, the storage pit has grown impressively. The steward paces the edge, occasionally barking orders, but mostly watching with cold calculation, estimating how much more can be extracted from your labour before darkness forces an end to the work. Your world has narrowed to the next swing of the pick, the next scoop of earth. Your body moves mechanically, conserving energy through efficient movement learned through years of similar labour. This is the physical reality of medieval survival. Bodies pushed to their limits day after day, year after year, until they finally break. "Someone's coming," calls a voice from the edge of the pit. All eyes turn to see a solitary figure hurrying across the field from the village. It's a boy, young Wat Cooper, whose family was stricken with the spotted fever. His presence sends a ripple of fear through the workers. No one wants him near, carrying contagion from his sick household. "Stay back!" shouts the steward as Wat approaches. "What business have you here?" Wat stops at a safe distance, his thin face pinched with cold and worry. "Message for Thomas Baker," he calls. His wife says come quick. Their boy's taken ill with the spots. Thomas drops his pick as though it's suddenly burning hot. His face drains of colour. "My William?" he asks, his voice cracking. "How bad?" Wat shifts uncomfortably. "Bad enough they sent me running." Without waiting for permission, Thomas scrambles out of the pit. The steward starts to object, then thinks better of it. Even he understands some emergencies outweigh the Lord's work. "Go," he says with grudging permission. "The rest of you, back to digging." Thomas runs toward the village without a backward glance, fear giving his tired legs new energy. You watch him go with a heavy heart. The spotted fever takes many children, especially in winter when bodies are already weakened by cold and limited food. Your own family has lost 2. A brother and sister who now lie in the churchyard under small wooden crosses. "Poor bastard," mutters the man working beside you. That's his only son. Work resumes with a sombre mood hanging over the pit. Illness is a constant companion in medieval life, striking without warning and often without mercy. You say a silent prayer for Thomas's boy, adding another to keep the fever from your own home. As the afternoon wears on, the sky begins to darken, with heavy clouds rolling in from the north. Your father's weather prediction is proving accurate. Snow is coming, and from the look of the clouds, plenty of it. "Finish up," the steward finally calls as the light begins to fade. "We'll continue tomorrow if weather permits." The relief is palpable as tools are collected and counted. The Lord's tools are too valuable to lose track of. Your shoulders and back scream with pain as you climb out of the pit, your legs wobbly from exhaustion. The day's labour has left you drained, but it isn't over yet. There are still home tasks waiting, animals to feed, firewood to gather, water to carry. You join the tired procession of men heading back to the village. Everyone walks with the same shuffling gait, bodies pushed beyond reasonable limits, but still moving forward because they must. This is survival in its most basic form, one step after another, one day after another. The village comes into view, smoke rising from multiple chimneys into the darkening sky. Despite its poverty and hardship, the sight stirs something warm in your chest, home such as it is. As you near the church, you notice a small crowd gathered outside. The 3 poachers are being led inside, their faces grim with the knowledge of what tomorrow will bring. The priest stands at the door, his expression unreadable as he prepares to lock them in for the night. You pause to watch, catching the eye of one prisoner, the tall one Thomas identified as Will Fletcher. There's no anger in his gaze, just a dull resignation that you recognise all too well. It's the look of a man who gambled for his family's survival and lost. Tomorrow he'll grasp red-hot iron and walk 3 steps while his flesh sizzles and smokes. If the wounds heal cleanly, a rare occurrence given the lack of proper medical care, he'll be deemed innocent by God and set free. If infection sets in, which is far more likely he'll lose a hand, or worse, all for trying to feed 5 hungry children. Justice is seldom fair in medieval England, but it's what you have. The alternative is no justice at all, a world where the strong simply take what they want without consequence. At least the ordeal gives him a chance, however small. You continue toward home, your thoughts troubled by the scene. The smell of wood smoke grows stronger, mixing with the earthy odours of animals and human habitation. Despite the coming snow and the exhaustion weighing down your limbs, you detour slightly to check the snares before darkness makes it impossible. The first 3 are empty, but the 4th holds another stroke of luck. A fat wood pigeon caught by its leg. Your spirits lift immediately. 2 meals with meat in one day is rare good fortune in winter. With the bird tucked inside your cloak, you hurry the rest of the way home. The snow begins just as you reach your door. Fat, lazy flakes that promise significant accumulation by morning. Inside, the hut is blessedly warm compared to the open fields. The fire burns steadily in the central hearth, and the smell of cooking fills the small space. Your mother and sister look up as you enter, relief crossing their faces. Thomas Baker's boy has the fever, your mother says before you can speak. It's not a question. News travels quickly in small communities. You nod, removing your cloak and revealing the pigeon. Caught in the snare, you say, handing it to your sister, who immediately begins the process of plucking it. Your father, your mother asks, returning to her spinning. Still working the drainage, you reply, settling near the fire to thaw your frozen fingers. Lord called me to dig the new storage pit. She makes a small noise of acknowledgement but offers no commentary. What would be the point? The work is what it is, unavoidable and necessary. Your youngest brother crawls into your lap seeking warmth and company. Despite your exhaustion, you welcome his small weight. His presence a reminder of why you endure each day's labour. For him, for all of them, for survival. They brought in the poachers today, you tell your mother as your sister efficiently prepares the pigeon. Ordeals tomorrow after morning mass. God have mercy on them, she replies quietly, making the sign of the cross. Outside, the snow falls heavier, blanketing the village in white silence. Tomorrow will bring fresh challenges, paths to clear, animals to tend, the storage pit to continue digging if the weather allows. It will also bring the ordeal, a grim reminder of justice in this harsh world. But for now, there is warmth, family, and the prospect of pigeon meat in the evening pottage. In medieval England, where survival balances on a knife's edge, these small comforts are everything. Your father returns as darkness falls completely, his face lined with exhaustion but the drainage work completed. He nods approvingly at the pigeon being added to the pot. Snow's getting heavy, he says, warming his hands by the fire. No field work tomorrow, I'd wager. The ordeal's tomorrow, your sister reminds him. Like many in the village, she finds the brutal spectacle fascinating despite its horror. Better than hanging, your father says pragmatically. At least they have a chance. A small chance, you think, but don't say. In your 15 years, you've never heard of anyone walking away unscathed from an ordeal by hot iron. The family gathers for the evening meal, a ritual repeated in every hut across the village. The pigeon has enriched the pottage considerably, adding flavour and precious fat to the simple porridge. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, the day's labour having earned this sustenance in the most direct way possible. Outside, the snow continues to fall, insulating the hut and muffling the sounds of the village. Tomorrow's challenges will come soon enough. For now, there is this moment of relative peace, this small victory against the constant struggle of medieval life. Your eyelids grow heavy as the warmth and food work their magic on your exhausted body. Another day survived, another night of rest before the cycle begins again. Morning arrives with a world transformed. Snow blankets everything in pristine white, softening the hard edges of medieval life under a deceptively gentle cover. The temperature has dropped further overnight, and your breath hangs in the air like little ghosts that dissolve almost as soon as they appear. Your father was right. There will be no field work today. Even the Lord's steward wouldn't expect men to dig through snow-covered frozen ground. But this doesn't mean a day of rest. In medieval England, there is always work, especially in winter when survival requires constant attention. Market day, your mother reminds everyone, as the family huddles around the morning fire, blowing on fingers and toes to restore feeling. Market happens every Tuesday, regardless of weather, in the village green near the church. Today, with snow nearly knee-deep in places, attendance will be smaller than usual, but some will brave the cold to trade what little they have. "We need salt," your father says, the words hanging heavy with implication. Salt is expensive, preciously so, but vital for preserving meat and fish. Without it, your family couldn't store food for lean times. "And thread," your mother adds, holding up the nearly empty spool. You're given a small pouch containing the family's trading goods, 2 carefully preserved rabbit furs from last week's catch, a small jar of precious honey from the single hive your family maintains, and 3 intricately carved wooden spoons your father made during the long winter evenings. "Trade fair," your mother warns as she hands you the pouch. "No less than 2 silver pennies for the honey." Money is rare in your household. Most trading happens through barter, goods for goods, but some items, like salt, can only be purchased with coin. The silver penny your family has saved since harvest time is tucked into a secret pocket sewn into your father's tunic. The village church bell rings the hour as you and your father step out into the snow. The cold immediately bites at your face, the only exposed part of your body. Everyone else in the family will stay home, conserving heat and energy. The fewer bodies moving through the snow, the better. Other villagers are emerging from their homes as well, trudging through the fresh snow toward the village centre. Despite the harsh conditions, there's an air of subdued excitement. Market day brings news, gossip, and the possibility of small luxuries. A taste of honey, a bit of colourful thread, perhaps even a sip of ale from the brewster's stand. As you near the village centre, you see the market taking shape. It's a small affair by any standard, nothing like the great markets in towns and cities, but it's the heart of local commerce. A dozen or so vendors have set up makeshift stalls, mostly just tables covered with whatever goods they have to offer. Goodwife Sarah has her usual array of rough-spun thread and yarn. What the miller has small sacks of flour from the Lord's mill where he works. Edwin the tanner displays a few simple leather goods, belts, pouches, and a single pair of shoes that would cost more than your family earns in a month. The travelling peddler who visits every few weeks is here too, his cart a treasure trove of exotic items from distant towns. But the market seems oddly subdued today, and not just because of the snow. There's a tension in the air that you can't immediately place. The ordeal, your father murmurs, nodding toward the church where a small crowd has already gathered despite the early hour. They're preparing. Sure enough, the parish priest stands outside the church door, deep in conversation with the manor's bailiff. Near them, a brazier has been set up, flames already dancing inside it. Even from this distance, you can see the iron rod protruding from the coals, its tip beginning to glow red. Your stomach tightens. The 3 poachers will face their judgment soon, their flesh pressed against that glowing metal in a test of divine favour that few survive unscathed. "Come," your father says, pulling your attention back to the task at hand. "Let's trade quickly. I don't want to be here when they bring them out." You nod in agreement and follow him to the peddler's cart, where he already haggles with an older woman over the price of a small mirror, an unimaginable luxury that costs more than your family would spend on food in a month. The peddler himself is a thin, wiry man with a perpetual squint and quick, darting eyes that miss nothing. His name is Bartholomew, though most simply call him Bart. He travels a circuit of villages in the region, bringing goods from towns and news from everywhere. "Ah, young Thomas," he greets you with a familiarity born of years of trading. "And Master Edward, what brings you to my humble cart today?" Perhaps a ribbon for the lady of the house, or a fine bone comb for the young girl? Your father is immune to such sales tactics. Salt, he says simply, and thread, if you have it. Bart's smile doesn't waver as he reaches beneath his cart. I have the finest salt from the coast, he says, producing a small cloth bag. Perfect for preserving. And thread? What colour does the good wife desire? Whatever is cheapest, your father replies pragmatically. As your father negotiates with Bart, your attention wanders back to the church where the crowd has grown. The ordeal will be a public spectacle, as justice always is in medieval England. Everyone will watch as the accused men place their palms against hot iron and take the required steps, their flesh sizzling, the smell of burning meat carrying across the village green. The memory of it will serve as both entertainment and warning. 3 silver pennies for both, Bart says, drawing your attention back. Your father's face hardens. Highway robbery, he mutters. 2 and not a farthing more. Bart sighs dramatically. I have children to feed, same as you, Master Edward. The roads are dangerous in winter, and salt doesn't transport itself. 2.5, and I'm cutting my own throat at that price. The haggling continues for several minutes, a dance both men know well. Eventually, they settle on 2 silver pennies and one of the rabbit furs. Your father hands over the precious coin, carefully wrapped in a scrap of cloth to prevent loss, and tucks the salt and thread into his belt pouch. Any news from beyond? He asks Bart, as he always does. In a world without newspapers or regular postal service, travellers like Bart are the primary source of information from the wider world. Bart glances around, then leans closer. Strange sickness in Blackwood, he says quietly. Started last week. People dancing in the streets, they say. Can't stop themselves. Some till they drop dead. Your father's brow furrows. Dancing sickness? You mean like the St. Vitus dance? Bart nods. Similar, though worse from what I hear. Some foaming at the mouth, seeing things that aren't there, whole families afflicted. A chill that has nothing to do with the winter cold runs down your spine. You've heard tales of such maladies, people seized by uncontrollable movements, dancing themselves to exhaustion, even death. Some say it's demonic possession, others blame poisoned air or contaminated water. Started after they ate the new rye bread, they say, Bart adds, his voice barely above a whisper now. Baker ground it fresh. By nightfall, half the village was dancing like madmen. Ergot. The word isn't spoken, but it hangs in the air between the adults. You've heard of it, a black fungus that sometimes grows on rye in damp conditions. When ground into flour and baked into bread, it can drive entire communities mad with visions and uncontrollable movements. That's less than a day's walk from here, your father says, his voice tight with concern. Your village grows rye too, stores it in the same conditions, grinds it at the same mill. I'd check your stores if I were you, Bart says, already turning to another customer. Black spots like little fingers, can't miss it if you know to look. Your father nods grimly, and you can see the mental calculation happening behind his eyes. Your family's rye stores, carefully harvested and preserved to last the winter, might now represent not salvation but danger. We should go, he says to you, already turning away from the market. The honey and remaining furs will have to wait for another day. This news takes precedence. But before you can leave, a commotion erupts near the church. The crowd parts as the 3 poachers are led out, their hands bound before them, faces pale with fear and cold. The priest follows, carrying a Bible and wearing his ceremonial vestments. Behind him, an altar boy swings a censer, filling the air with the sharp scent of incense. Despite your father's desire to leave, you both find yourselves frozen in place, watching the grim procession. The entire market has gone still, all eyes drawn to the unfolding spectacle of medieval justice. The poachers are led to the brazier, where the iron rod now glows a bright, angry red. The bailiff reads the charges in a loud, formal voice: trespassing on the king's land, taking the king's deer, resisting arrest. The penalty would normally be hanging, he explains. But in his mercy, the Lord has granted them the chance to prove their innocence through ordeal. If God finds them innocent, their wounds will heal clean, the bailiff concludes. If guilty, the wounds will fester and justice will be done. The priest steps forward, sprinkling holy water on the glowing iron and murmuring Latin prayers. This is no mere physical test, it's a spiritual one, calling upon divine judgment to reveal the truth that human authorities cannot discern on their own. The first poacher is brought forward, Will Fletcher, the tall man with 5 children. His face is a mask of terror as the ropes binding his wrists are cut. The bailiff explains the test. He must grasp the iron rod, carry it 3 paces, then place it on the ground. His hand will then be bandaged and sealed with the church's wax. In 3 days, the bandages will be removed and God's judgment revealed. Will looks out at the crowd, perhaps searching for familiar faces or simply trying to find courage in the moment. His eyes meet yours briefly, and in that moment you see not a criminal, but a desperate man facing an impossible choice. The priest offers final prayers, then nods to the bailiff. 2 men-at-arms hold Will's arms, preventing any last-minute attempt to flee. The bailiff gestures to the glowing iron. "Take it," he commands. Will's hand shakes violently as he reaches for the rod. A collective breath is held throughout the crowd. Then, with a strangled cry, he grasps the iron. The sizzle of burning flesh is audible even where you stand. The smell follows a moment later, acrid, stomach-turning. Will screams, a primal sound of agony that cuts through the winter air like a knife. "Walk," the bailiff commands. Somehow, incredibly, Will takes 1 step, then another. His face is contorted in agony, tears streaming down his cheeks. The iron has already burned through the first layers of his palm, cauterizing blood vessels even as it destroys nerve endings. 3 steps. He drops the iron, falling to his knees in the snow, cradling his ruined hand against his chest and rocking back and forth in wordless agony. The priest immediately steps forward, applying a salve of oil and herbs to the wound before wrapping it in clean linen bandages. The wax seal is applied, ensuring the bandage remains undisturbed until the appointed time for examination. You turn away, unable to watch as the second poacher is brought forward. Your father's hand on your shoulder guides you away from the scene, back toward your home at the edge of the village. "Barbaric," he mutters, though quietly enough that only you can hear. Criticism of justice, like criticism of the church or the Lord, is dangerous even when justified. As you walk, your thoughts are a jumble of horror at what you've witnessed and fear about Bart's news from Blackwood. The dancing sickness, ergot poisoning, is no small matter. Entire villages have been wiped out when their rye stores were contaminated. Your home comes into view, smoke rising steadily from the hole in the thatch. Before entering, your father stops at the small lean-to attached to the main structure, where the family's grain is stored in wooden barrels. He digs through the snow that's drifted against the door and pulls it open. Inside, the space is cold but dry, essential for preventing the very problem you now fear. Your father lifts the lid off the rye barrel and scoops a handful of the dark grains onto his palm. Bring it to the light, he says, and you follow him back out into the snow. In the winter daylight, he carefully examines the grains, turning them over with one finger. There, he says finally, holding up a single grain for you to see. Even to your untrained eye, the difference is obvious. Instead of the normal rye kernel, this one is elongated, blackened, slightly curved like a tiny witch's finger. Ergot. How bad? You ask, your voice barely above a whisper. Your father doesn't answer immediately, returning to the storage lean-to to examine more of the rye. When he emerges again, his expression is grim. Bad enough, he says. We can't use this barrel, maybe not any of the rye. The implications hit you like a physical blow. The rye represents nearly half your family's winter food stores. Without it, surviving until spring becomes an open question rather than a challenging certainty. Your father sees the fear on your face. We'll manage, he says, with more confidence than he likely feels. We still have barley and dried peas. Your mother can stretch it further than you'd think possible. Inside the hut, the news is received with the stoic practicality that characterizes your family's approach to all crises. Your mother simply nods, already calculating new ratios for the pottage pot. Your sister asks if the bad rye can be fed to the animals. No, your father says firmly. We'll burn it. Today. The sickness affects beasts as well as men. What about Thomas Baker's boy? You ask, remembering yesterday's emergency. The fever, your mother shakes her head. Dead before midnight, she says, making the sign of the cross. Buried this morning early. Another small wooden cross in the churchyard, another family devastated by winter's hardships. You say a small prayer for Thomas and his wife, now childless in a world where children are both blessing and insurance against an uncertain future. As your father prepares to burn the contaminated rye, a painful waste of food but necessary, your mother takes stock of the remaining stores. The calculations are grim but not hopeless, with careful rationing and a bit of luck with the snares and fishing nets. You might make it to spring when fresh greens begin to appear. The honey, she says suddenly, remembering the trading goods you took to market. Did you sell it? You shake your head. No time. The ordeal started, and then we heard about the sickness in Blackwood. She nods, unsurprised. Good. We may need it ourselves now. Honey is more than a sweetener in medieval England. It's medicine, preservative, and in desperate times, a source of quick energy when nothing else is available. Your mother has used it to treat wounds, soothe coughs, and preserve summer berries for winter consumption. The rest of the day passes in a flurry of activity centered on food security. The contaminated rye is carefully burned in the central hearth, each handful accompanied by a small prayer for protection. The remaining food stores are checked for any signs of mold or rot. The snares are reset in new locations, and your father even breaks the ice on the village pond to try his luck with the fishing net, a largely unsuccessful effort that yields only 2 small fish barely worth the energy expended to catch them. By late afternoon, word of Blackwood's affliction has spread through the entire village. The priest calls for special prayers during evening vespers, and most villagers attend despite the cold and snow. Medieval life exists at the intersection of practical action and spiritual supplication. You do everything physically possible to survive while simultaneously appealing to divine protection. They say 3 have died already in Blackwood, whispers Anne, the tanner's wife, as the village gathers in the small stone church, dancing themselves to death, foaming at the mouth like rabid dogs. Demons, suggests the blacksmith's apprentice, his young face serious beneath his soot-stained cap. My grandmother saw the same in her village as a girl, said the whole place had to be blessed by the bishop himself before it stopped. The priest overhears this speculation and frowns. "Not demons," he corrects firmly, "though the devil may work through natural means. It's the grain, corrupted by poor storage or bad harvesting. God sends us trials, but also the wisdom to overcome them." It's a surprisingly practical view from a man whose life revolves around spiritual matters, but not unusual in medieval times. The division between natural and supernatural explanations isn't as clear-cut as it will become in later centuries. The priest can believe simultaneously in demonic forces and contaminated grain without seeing any contradiction. After prayers, the village headman calls for a meeting in the churchyard. Despite the cold, most adults remain to discuss the twin threats now facing the community: the dancing sickness from Blackwood and the spotted fever that took Thomas's son. "We must check all grain stores," the headman announces. "Anything suspect must be burned, not sold or traded. This sickness spreads through food, not air like the fever." There are murmurs of discontent at this. Burning food in winter feels like madness, but no one openly objects. The dancing sickness is too terrifying a prospect to risk. "What of those who have no other stores?" asks a widow, whose meagre provisions are well known in the village. "I've nothing but rye to last till spring." This prompts a moment of uncomfortable silence. Medieval charity exists, but it's limited by the fact that everyone lives close to subsistence. "The church has stores," the priest says finally. "Not much, but enough to help those in greatest need, and perhaps the Lord might open his granary for a fair price." Few believe this last suggestion will bear fruit, but no one says so aloud. The Lord's generosity rarely extends to reduced prices, even in times of crisis. As darkness falls, you walk home with your family, the church bells ringing the end of day behind you. The village settles into its evening routine. Fires built up for the night, animals fed their meagre winter rations, prayers said for protection through the cold darkness. Inside your hut, the evening meal is noticeably smaller than usual. A thin pottage with more water than substance, a harder sacrifice to bear after witnessing the ordeal and learning of the contaminated rye. But it's hot, and there's enough to take the edge off hunger, which is more than some can say. "Will we have enough?" your sister asks as she scrapes the last bits from her wooden bowl. At 12, she's old enough to understand the precariousness of your situation, but young enough to still voice the fears adults have learned to keep silent. Your mother's hand gently smooths her hair. "God provides," she says simply. "We've weathered worse winters." Whether this is true or merely the comfort a mother offers her children is hard to say. Memory has a way of softening past hardships once they're survived, while present dangers always loom largest. As night deepens, the family settles into sleep positions around the central hearth. Father and mother on one side, children on the other, grandmother in the warmest spot nearest the embers. The pig and goat shift in their corner, their animal heat a welcome addition to the hut's warmth. Outside, snow continues to fall, adding another layer to the white blanket covering the village. Inside, your family sleeps the sleep of the medieval poor, alert to danger even in rest, bodies never fully relaxing after a lifetime of hard labour and uncertainty. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, more food to find, more work to complete, more dangers to avoid. But for now, there is the simple miracle of another day survived, another night of shelter against the unforgiving medieval winter. You wake with a start, confused for a moment about the time. The hut is dark except for the glow of embers, and everyone remains asleep around you. It takes a moment to realize what happened. You've experienced what medieval people call first sleep. The practice of sleeping in two distinct segments is normal in your world. Without candles to burn through the long winter nights, most people go to bed shortly after sunset, sleep for several hours, then wake naturally in the middle of the night. This wakeful period, lasting an hour or more, is followed by second sleep until dawn. You sit up carefully, trying not to disturb the others. The fire has burned down to glowing coals, casting just enough light to make out the sleeping forms of your family. Your father's breathing is deep and steady, one arm protectively draped over your mother. Your sister and youngest brother are curled together like puppies, sharing warmth. Grandmother's soft snores punctuate the quiet. This middle-of-the-night waking isn't considered insomnia in medieval times. It's a normal, even useful part of the daily rhythm. Some use it for prayer, others for quiet contemplation. Married couples often take advantage of this private time for intimacy. Craftsmen sometimes work by the dim firelight, making small items or repairs. For you, it's a rare moment of solitude in a life where privacy is almost non-existent. You add a small piece of wood to the embers, careful not to make noise. The flames catch slowly, throwing slightly more light around the single-room dwelling. In that gentle illumination, you take stock of your home with fresh eyes. It's humble by any standard, walls of wattle and daub, twigs woven together and covered with a mixture of clay, straw and dung, a roof of thatch, a packed earth floor covered partially with rushes. There are no windows except the small opening covered with stretched bladder skin. The smoke hole in the roof serves as both chimney and limited ventilation. Yet this simple structure keeps your family alive through brutal winters. Without it, you would surely perish. The awareness of this basic fact, shelter equals survival, shapes how medieval people view their homes. They are not status symbols or expressions of personality. They are survival tools, as vital as food and water. The quiet is broken by your father stirring. He sits up, unsurprised to see you awake. This middle night vigil is familiar to him too. "Can't sleep?" he whispers, moving carefully around the sleeping forms to join you by the fire. You shrug. "Just woke up." He nods, understanding. "Good time to think," he says, poking gently at the small flame. "Or pray." For a while, you sit in companionable silence. Words are often unnecessary between people who work side by side every day of their lives. The quiet itself feels like a luxury after days filled with labour and evenings crowded with family. "Thomas came by while you were checking snares," your father finally says. "Wanted to thank you for working his section of the pit yesterday. Said he won't forget it." You nod, surprised and touched. Thomas Baker has nothing to give as thanks. His only child dead, his household still at risk from the spotted fever. Yet the acknowledgement itself is valuable in a community where reputation and goodwill are forms of currency. "How is his wife?" you ask. Your father sighs. "As you'd expect. The priest is with her most days, praying." Another silence falls, both of you contemplating the fragility of life in medieval England. Children die frequently from disease, accident, hunger, yet each loss tears at the fabric of family and community. No matter how common, it never becomes easy. "The poacher's ordeal," you say after a while. "Do you think—" "Best not to talk of it," your father interrupts gently. "What's done is done. Justice belongs to God and the king." You understand his caution. Questioning justice is dangerous, even in the privacy of your home. Walls are thin, and medieval communities are dense with relationships and rivalries. Words have a way of travelling. As if reading your thoughts, your father adds, "Old Edwin claims he knew Will Fletcher's father, says they served together in the Lord's militia years ago, before you were born." This is your father's way of sharing information without expressing a direct opinion. The connection humanizes the poacher, making him more than just a criminal facing ordeal. He becomes part of the village's complex web of relationships and history. The fire pops and shifts, sending a small shower of sparks upward. Outside, the snow has stopped and the night is eerily silent. Your father takes a small knife from his belt and a piece of wood from beside the hearth. Without speaking, he begins to carve small, precise cuts that gradually shape the wood into a crude but recognizable bird. This is how medieval people often spend their winter evenings and night wakings, in simple crafts that require little light. Women spin thread or mend clothing. Men carve wood or repair tools. Even children learn to make simple objects: dolls from straw, balls from rags, slings from leather scraps. "Remember what I taught you about the stars?" your father asks unexpectedly, his hands never pausing in their work. You nod. The stars are vital navigational tools, especially for those who must sometimes travel between villages. Your father has taught you to find north using the pole star, to estimate time by the movement of familiar constellations, to predict weather by certain patterns of starlight. Good, he says. Knowledge outlasts tools, can't be stolen or broken. Remember that? This is as close as your father comes to philosophy, practical wisdom distilled from a lifetime of survival. Medieval education for common people isn't found in books or schools, but in these moments of transmitted knowledge, passed from generation to generation through direct experience. "I should check the animals," he says, setting aside his half-finished carving. The household pig and goat need occasional attention even at night, especially in cold weather. While he tends to them, you remain by the fire, enjoying the rare moment of warmth and relative comfort. Medieval life offers few such respites, brief pauses in the constant work of survival. Your father returns, bringing a fresh blast of cold air that makes the fire flicker. "Snow's stopped," he reports. "Stars are bright. Will be colder tomorrow." This weather report is delivered not as idle conversation, but as vital information. Tomorrow's temperature will determine everything from what work can be done to how much food needs to be consumed to maintain body heat. In a world without thermometers or weather forecasts, reading natural signs is an essential skill. "We should sleep," he says, already moving back to his place beside your mother. "Dawn comes early." You nod, banking the fire carefully to preserve the embers through the rest of the night. As you settle back onto your straw-filled mattress, you feel the rhythm of medieval nights working its familiar pattern. First sleep, waking, second sleep, dawn. A cycle as old as humanity, only recently forgotten in a world of artificial light and regulated hours. Sleep comes quickly, your body accustomed to this brief middle-night waking. The last thing you see before closing your eyes is the gentle rise and fall of your family's breathing, each life precious in its fragility, each breath a small victory against the harsh medieval winter. Dawn arrives with the distant sound of the church bell calling the village to prime, the first prayer service of the day. Inside your hut, the family stirs slowly to life, bodies reluctant to leave the relative warmth of shared sleeping spaces. The fire, carefully banked overnight, needs only gentle coaxing to resume its vital work. Today promises to be slightly different from yesterday, with the Lord's storage pit buried under snow and the fields similarly inaccessible. The village turns to indoor work and community activities. For your family, this means joining others in the village hall. A simple timber structure near the church where villagers gather for meetings, celebrations, and shared winter tasks. Bring the wool, your mother instructs your sister, pointing to the basket of raw fleece that's been waiting to be processed, and the spindle. Wool processing is communal work in winter, when multiple hands make the tedious task more bearable. Women and girls from throughout the village will gather to card, spin, and eventually weave the raw wool into fabric that's vital for everything from clothing to bedding. Your father and brothers will join the men in repairing tools, making candles from saved animal fat, and carving needed implements for spring planting. This sexual division of labour is rigid in medieval England. Certain tasks belong exclusively to men, others to women, with little crossover except in emergencies. The walk to the village hall is easier today, with paths trampled through yesterday's snow by earlier risers. The sky is brilliantly clear, the sun dazzling as it reflects off the white landscape. The temperature has dropped further, just as your father predicted, making each breath painful in your lungs. Smoke rises from every dwelling, creating a low haze over the village. The church stands at the centre, its stone walls and modest bell tower representing the most substantial building most villagers will ever enter. Beside it, the village hall buzzes with activity already, voices and occasional laughter spilling out into the cold morning. Inside, warmth hits you like a physical force. Multiple fires burn in the long open room, and bodies press together on simple benches arranged around the perimeter. The hall isn't fancy, dirt floor, timber walls, thatch roof, but compared to individual dwellings, it's positively grand, capable of holding most of the village's adult population. Your family separates naturally, mother and sister joining the women at one end, father and brothers moving toward the men at the other. You, at 15, occupy that in-between space of late childhood, still learning from both sides before settling fully into adult male responsibilities. "Thomas, come help with these candles," calls John Cooper, motioning you toward a table where tallow, rendered animal fat, is being carefully melted in a small pot over coals. Steady hands make straight candles. You join him, grateful for the inclusion. Candle making is skilled work, creating precious light sources that most families can afford only for special occasions or emergencies. The process is slow and precise, repeated dipping of wicks into the melted tallow, allowing each layer to cool and harden before the next dip. As you work, conversation flows around you. Unlike modern social gatherings centered on entertainment or structured activities, medieval community time revolves around productive work made more pleasant through company. "Heard anything more from Blackwood?" John asks quietly as you carefully dip a row of hanging wicks. You shake your head. "Nothing since yesterday's news." "My cousin lives near there," offers William, the carpenter's apprentice working beside you. "Says 3 more fell to the dancing sickness last night. That makes 6 dead." A murmur passes through the nearby men. 6 deaths in a village roughly the size of your own represents a significant portion of the population, particularly troubling in winter when replacing lost labour is impossible. "Did they burn their grain?" asks another man. William nods. Everything suspect. Still didn't help those already sick. The conversation shifts to other topics. Speculation about when the Lord will demand work on the storage pit resume, discussion of repairs needed for the village mill, debates about the best time to begin preparing fields once the snow melts. Through it all, hands remain busy. Men carve wooden tools, repair leather harnesses, twist straw into thatch bundles for spring repairs, and fashion new arrows for hunting. No one sits idle. Idleness is an unaffordable luxury in a world where survival depends on constant preparation. At the women's end of the hall, a different kind of productivity unfolds. The rhythmic whir of spinning wheels and the soft thwack of carding paddles create a backdrop for feminine conversation. Women discuss child-rearing, food preservation techniques, herbal remedies, and household management. Vital knowledge passed from mother to daughter, neighbour to neighbour. Midday brings a communal meal, not a feast by any standard, but a pleasant change from eating only with immediate family. Each household contributes something small to the pot, a handful of dried vegetables, a few pieces of salt fish, a portion of precious grain. Together these meagre offerings become a substantial pottage that fills the hall with savoury steam. The village priest blesses the food before eating begins. His role extends far beyond Sunday services and occasional sacraments. He is teacher, record keeper, mediator, and moral authority, one of the few villagers with any formal education, however limited by modern standards. "Any word of the poachers, Father?" someone asks as wooden bowls are distributed for the meal. The priest's face remains carefully neutral. "They rest and pray," he says. "God's judgment will be revealed in 2 days' time." No one presses for details. The 3 men, their bandaged hands sealed with the church's wax, are being kept in a small room attached to the church. Not quite prisoners, not quite patients, but somewhere in between as they await divine verdict on their wounds. As the communal meal winds down, the hall's atmosphere shifts subtly. The practical work of the morning gives way to afternoon storytelling, a vital part of medieval entertainment and education combined. With daylight precious and physical energy limited by winter's challenges, tales provide both diversion and instruction with minimal expenditure of resources. "Master Edward," calls Anne, the tanner's wife. "Surely you remember the tale of Sir Gareth and the Green Knight? The children would love to hear it again. Your father looks momentarily uncomfortable with the attention, but medieval communities expect each member to contribute their talents to the common good. His skill as a storyteller is well known, having been passed down from his own father." "Well," he begins, settling on a bench where the hall's largest fire casts dramatic shadows across his weathered face. "It happened in the days of good King Arthur, when England was young and magic still walked openly among us. Children abandoned their small tasks to gather at his feet, eyes wide with anticipation. Adults continue their work, but tilt their heads to listen, momentarily transported from the harsh realities of medieval winter to a world of knights, honour, and clear moral choices." Your father's voice takes on a different quality as he tells the tale, deeper, more confident, almost musical in its cadence. This is oral tradition at its finest, stories preserved not in books, which few can read, but in memory and voice, passed from generation to generation with small variations that keep them alive and relevant. "The Green Knight was taller than any mortal man," he continues, his hands gesturing to indicate impossible height, his skin and beard as green as summer leaves, his eyes burning like emerald fire. "You've heard this story dozens of times, yet it never loses its power." The children gasp at the description, already captivated. Even the adults smile with anticipation of favourite parts to come. As the tale unfolds, the mysterious challenge, the beheading that doesn't kill, the year-long quest, the final test of honour, you observe how perfectly it embodies medieval values. Courage, faith, honesty and loyalty are rewarded. Pride, deception and cowardice are punished. The moral is clear without being stated explicitly. Virtue leads to salvation, sin to destruction. When the story concludes with Sir Gareth's triumphant return to Camelot, the hall erupts in appreciative murmurs. For a brief time, the cold, hunger, and constant work have been forgotten, replaced by the warmth of shared experience and cultural connection. Other stories follow, some heroic like Your Father's Tale, others humorous or cautionary. An old woman recounts how St. Cuthbert protected travellers in a terrible storm. The blacksmith tells a bawdy tale of a merchant tricked by his clever wife, earning roars of laughter from adults and confused looks from children. The priest contributes a parable about charity that serves as both entertainment and gentle reminder of Christian duty. Through it all, work continues. Hands card wool, repair tools, mend clothing, and prepare materials for tomorrow's tasks. Medieval productivity rarely pauses completely, even during leisure. As afternoon fades toward evening, families begin gathering their things to return home. Precious daylight is waning, and each household must tend to animals, prepare evening meals, and secure dwellings before full darkness falls. The community time has been valuable, both practically and socially, but individual survival still demands the majority of attention. Your family walks home together through the blue shadows of late afternoon. The temperature continues to drop as the sun sinks toward the horizon, and breath hangs in the air like small personal clouds. No one speaks much. Energy conservation becomes instinctive in extreme cold. At home, the evening routine unfolds with practiced efficiency. Your father and brothers check snares and fishing lines, yielding one small rabbit today, a welcome addition to the evening pottage. Your mother and sister tend the fire and prepare the meal, stretching limited ingredients with skill born of necessity. Grandmother sorts through dried herbs hanging from the rafters, selecting those needed for both cooking and simple medicines. This division of labour isn't just cultural, it's survival strategy. Each person has specific responsibilities that, when completed properly, maximise the household's chances of making it through another day. The evening meal is simple but sufficient: barley pottage enriched with the rabbit and a handful of dried vegetables preserved from summer's garden. Everyone receives a roughly equal portion, though you notice your mother taking slightly less than others. This quiet self-sacrifice is common among medieval parents, particularly in winter when food is scarce. As darkness claims the village completely, your family settles around the central hearth for the day's final activities. Medieval evenings are necessarily limited by light. Precious candles and lamp oil are saved for emergencies or special occasions. Most households rely entirely on firelight after sunset. In this gentle, flickering illumination, quiet handwork continues. Your father returns to his carving from the previous night. Your mother and sister spin thread from carded wool. Grandmother teaches your youngest brother to make a simple trap from twigs and string. You help scrape and prepare the rabbit skin for later use. Nothing is wasted, each part of the animal serving some purpose. Conversation is sporadic and practical. Observations about weather, plans for tomorrow's tasks, speculation about when the Lord will call for labour service again. Absent are the entertainments that will eventually fill evening hours. No books, games, or diversions beyond occasional stories and the simple pleasure of family company. This routine, repeated in households throughout medieval England, represents a fundamental pattern of human existence that remained largely unchanged for centuries. Days structured by light and darkness, work divided by gender and age, survival dependent on community cooperation, balanced with family self-sufficiency. As the fire burns down to embers, your father leads the family in evening prayers, simple expressions of gratitude for another day survived and requests for protection through the night ahead. The formal Latin prayers of church services are replaced by straightforward appeals in the common tongue, reflecting the practical relationship medieval peasants maintain with their faith. Sleep positions are assumed around the fire, bodies arranged to maximize shared warmth through the bitter night. The animals settle in their corner, their breathing adding to the chorus of human sounds that fill the small space. Outside, stars glitter in impossible profusion across the black winter sky. The village is quiet except for occasional dog barks and the creak of trees contracting in the cold. No artificial light pollutes the darkness, no mechanical sounds break the natural silence. Medieval nights are both profoundly dark and achingly quiet by modern standards. As you drift towards sleep, your thoughts return to the day's events, the community gathering, your father's storytelling, the simple pleasure of shared work and food. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but for now there is the basic comfort of shelter, family, and the knowledge that you've survived another day in the precarious balance of medieval existence. Your breathing slows, joining the rhythm of those around you. First sleep approaches, then the middle waking, then second sleep until dawn calls you back to the endless work of staying alive in a world both harsh and beautiful in its simplicity. First sleep claims you quickly, your body surrendering to exhaustion born of cold and labour, but as midnight approaches, you stir once again into that peculiar state of middle-night wakefulness that medieval people consider normal. The hut is nearly dark, the fire reduced to faintly glowing embers that cast more shadows than light. The breathing of your family creates a gentle rhythm around you, some deep in slumber, others perhaps experiencing the same wakeful period but remaining still and quiet in their own thoughts. Outside, the winter night presses against the thin walls of your dwelling. Medieval nights are profound in their darkness. No streetlights, no passing cars, no illuminated windows, just vast, complete blackness broken only by starlight and the occasional glow of a night watchman's lantern in the village centre. This darkness breeds both practical dangers and supernatural fears. Your mind drifts to both as you lie awake, staring at the barely visible thatch above. The practical threats are numerous and real. Fires can start from poorly banked hearths, consuming entire villages before anyone can respond. Thieves might take advantage of the darkness to steal precious food stores or livestock. Wild animals, wolves especially, grow bold with winter hunger, sometimes venturing into villages to snatch chickens, goats, or even children. Can't sleep? The whispered voice startles you slightly. It's your mother, awake on her straw mattress across the hearth. Just thinking, you whisper back. She shifts slightly, careful not to wake your father beside her. About what? The night, you say simply. What's out there? She makes a small sound of understanding. Medieval people have a complex relationship with night. It's a time of vulnerability, mystery, and danger, but also reflection, rest, and occasionally wonder. Your grandfather used to say that night is when the world holds its breath, she murmurs, when everything that is and everything that might be stand side by side. This poetic thought seems at odds with the practical woman who stretches meagre food supplies and works from dawn to dusk. But medieval minds contain multitudes, practicality and mysticism often coexisting without contradiction. A sound outside draws both your attentions, the soft crunch of footsteps in snow passing close to your dwelling, the night watchman, most likely, making his rounds. The watch is an essential part of medieval village security. Men take turns serving as watchmen, patrolling through the night hours with lanterns, alert for fires, intruders, or other dangers. In larger towns, they might call the hours, but in your small village, they move in silence, their presence more reassuring than intrusive. Did I ever tell you about the night spirits your grandmother taught me to recognize? Your mother asks, her voice so soft it barely carries across the small space between you. You shake your head, then realize she probably can't see the gesture in the near darkness. No, you whisper. There are 3 kinds, she begins, her voice taking on the rhythmic quality of oft-repeated folk wisdom. The wanderers who mean no harm but may lead travellers astray, the watchers who guard certain places and must be respected, and the hungry ones who seek to take what isn't theirs to take. This categorization of supernatural threats reflects medieval understanding of an unseen world existing alongside the visible one, not quite religious doctrine, not merely superstition, but something in between, a framework for explaining the inexplicable. How do you know which is which, you ask, drawn into the tale despite your 15 years and growing practical knowledge of the world? Wanderers move with the wind and leave no footprints in snow or mud, she explains. Watchers stay in one place, a particular tree or stone or crossing, and hungry ones, she pauses. Hungry ones can look like anyone or anything, but animals always know. Dogs growl, cats hiss, horses refuse to pass. You think of the village dogs that sometimes bark at nothing in the night. Is it truly nothing, or something only they can perceive? And how do you stay safe? This is the crucial question. Medieval folklore always contains practical protection strategies alongside the identification of threats. Iron keeps wanderers at bay, a nail in your pocket or a knife under your pillow. For watchers, a small offering will do, a crust of bread or drop of ale left at their place. But for hungry ones, her voice drops even lower. For hungry ones, you need prayer, salt, and fire. And even then, it's best to simply stay behind closed doors when darkness falls. The practical wisdom embedded in these supernatural precautions is evident. Iron tools represent civilization and human craft. Food offerings acknowledge the importance of reciprocity and respect for local landmarks. Prayer, salt, and fire are all purifying elements that also provide real protection against mundane threats, human ill intent, food spoilage, and the dangers of darkness. A sudden howl from the distant woods sends a shiver down your spine. Wolves, not supernatural but dangerous nonetheless, especially in lean winter months when hunger drives them closer to human settlements. They won't come to the village, your mother reassures, hearing your sharp intake of breath, not with fires and dogs and men. Most of the time, this is true, but village memory contains rare, terrible exceptions. A child taken from a doorway at dusk, a lone traveller found half-eaten on the road, livestock slaughtered in their pens despite precautions. These memories form another layer of medieval night fears. Not supernatural, but natural dangers magnified by darkness and isolation. Try to sleep, your mother suggests gently. Dawn comes early, and there's much to do tomorrow. You nod in the darkness, settling back onto your straw mattress. Outside, the night watchman's footsteps fade as he continues his rounds. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, a sound medieval folklore associates variously with wisdom, death omens, or simply good hunting. Your thoughts drift to the 3 poachers, locked in the small room beside the church, their burned hands throbbing in the night. Do they lie awake as you do, contemplating dangers both seen and unseen? Do they pray for clean healing or resign themselves to further punishment? Medieval justice, like medieval knights, contains elements both practical and mysterious. The ordeal by hot iron serves both as punishment and as appeal to divine judgment, pain and prayer intertwined in a system that acknowledges both worldly authority and spiritual power. As your mind wanders these paths, tiredness begins to reclaim you. Second sleep approaches, deeper than the first and typically lasting until dawn breaks. Your breathing slows, your thoughts grow less coherent, and the gentle sounds of your family fade into the background of consciousness. Dreams come, as they do for all medieval sleepers. In a world without modern entertainment or constant stimulation, dreams hold special significance, sometimes seen as mere reflections of daily life, other times as portents or messages from beyond. Your dream tonight is vivid, as winter dreams often are. You walk through the village, but it's strangely empty. The houses dark and silent. Snow falls, but makes no sound as it touches the ground. At the village centre, near the church, a figure stands, too tall to be human, wrapped in shadows despite the surrounding whiteness. The figure turns toward you, its face obscured but somehow familiar. It raises a hand, pointing toward the forest edge where something moves among the trees. Many somethings, their eyes reflecting firelight though no fire burns. You try to run but find yourself moving with dream slowness, each step requiring enormous effort. The shadowy figure watches without moving as the creatures from the forest edge draw closer, their forms shifting between wolf and human and something else entirely. Just as they reach the first houses, the church bell begins to toll, not the measured rings that mark the hours, but a frantic, continuous peal that signals emergency. Fire, attack, you can't tell, but the sound penetrates even the dream, growing louder until you wake suddenly, heart pounding, to real bells ringing in the pre-dawn darkness. Around you, your family is already stirring, confusion and alarm on their sleep-creased faces. "What is it?" your sister asks, clutching her blanket. "Fire?" Your father is already pulling on his boots, face grim. "One way to find out," he says, reaching for his heaviest cloak. Medieval village alarms are rare but significant. They call able-bodied residents to address whatever threat has emerged. No one ignores the summons, regardless of cold or darkness or personal reluctance. "Stay here," your father tells your mother, who nods and begins stoking the fire to full strength. If there's trouble in the village, having a warm hearth to return to could be vital. You follow your father into the bitter pre-dawn cold, the sky still black overhead though hints of grey touch the eastern horizon. Other men emerge from neighbouring houses, expressions questioning but movements purposeful. Everyone heads toward the church where the bells continue their urgent summons. The village centre is chaos. People gathering, voices raised in question and exclamation, the night watchman attempting to maintain order. By the church door stands the priest, his face pale in the torchlight. "What's happened?" someone calls from the crowd. The priest raises his hands for silence, waiting until the confused voices subside before speaking. "The prisoners are gone," he announces, his voice carrying in the cold air. "The poachers escaped during the night." A murmur runs through the gathered villagers. Escape is a serious matter, not just for the fugitives, whose punishment will be far worse if recaptured, but for the village itself. The Lord will hold the community responsible for failing to secure criminals under church protection. "How?" demands the village reeve, pushing to the front of the crowd. "The door was barred and guarded." The night watchman steps forward, his face tight with shame and fear. "I checked every hour, as instructed. At midnight all was well, but when I returned at the first hour past midnight," he trails off, gesturing helplessly. "The bar was removed from the outside," the priest says, his tone making clear what this implies. Someone in the village helped them. This revelation sends another darker ripple through the crowd. External threats, fire, wolves, wandering outlaws, unite a medieval community in common defense. Internal betrayal is far more troubling, undermining the mutual trust that village survival depends upon. "We must search," announces the Reeve, taking charge of the situation. "Form groups of 3 or 4. Check every building, every shed, every haystack. They can't have gone far in this cold, especially with injured hands." The men quickly organise themselves into search parties, each taking responsibility for a section of the village and surrounding areas. You join your father and 2 neighbours assigned to check the northern edge where the village meets the forest. Dawn is breaking as your group sets out, the eastern sky lightening to pale grey, though the sun remains below the horizon. The snow makes tracking theoretically easier, but the night's foot traffic, particularly around the village centre, has created a confusing maze of overlapping prints. "Look for blood," suggests one of your companions grimly. Their hands would be bleeding through the bandages. It's a practical but disturbing observation. The burned flesh would indeed seep through even the church's careful wrappings, leaving telltale spots in the snow. Medieval tracking often relies on such details: blood trails, broken branches, disturbed ground cover. Rather than the footprints that modern minds might prioritise, your search reveals nothing in the immediate village area, so the group continues toward the forest edge. The trees stand like dark sentinels against the lightening sky, their shadows stretching long across the unbroken snow. Something about the scene reminds you uncomfortably of your dream. The snow, the forest, the sense of hidden watchers. "There," your father says suddenly, pointing to a subtle disturbance in the snow near a large oak tree. "Someone passed here, heading into the woods." The signs are faint but readable to experienced eyes. A slight compression in the snow, a broken twig, a smear of something that might be blood on the tree's rough bark. Your group follows the trail cautiously, aware that cornered fugitives might be dangerous despite their injuries. The forest in winter is eerily quiet, the snow dampening natural sounds and the cold keeping many creatures in their dens or nests. Your breath forms clouds that hang briefly in the air before dissolving. The light grows stronger as you walk, making the snow crystals glitter like countless tiny stars. "They're heading north," observes one of your companions after nearly an hour of careful tracking. "Toward Blackwood." This observation sends a chill through the group that has nothing to do with the temperature. Blackwood, where the dancing sickness has already claimed 6 lives. Why would the fugitives head there of all places? Perhaps they don't know, suggests your father, though his tone indicates doubt. News travels between villages even in winter, carried by peddlers and travellers. The poachers would likely have heard of the affliction before their capture. Or perhaps they do know, says the oldest man in your group darkly, and hope pursuers will fear to follow. This perspective, that the fugitives might deliberately use the threat of sickness as protection, reflects the medieval understanding of disease as something almost tangible, a danger that can be approached or avoided through deliberate choice rather than invisible contagion. The trail leads deeper into the forest, eventually joining a narrow track that serves as a rough road between villages. Here, the signs become harder to follow. The packed snow of the path reveals less detail than the soft drifts among the trees. "We should turn back," your father says, after another hour of increasingly difficult tracking. "We're getting too close to Blackwood, and the others will be wondering where we are." No one argues. The morning is advancing, the sun now fully visible through the trees, and other duties wait in the village. Medieval time management always involves balancing competing necessities, in this case the pursuit of fugitives against the daily work of survival. The return journey passes in thoughtful silence. The escape will have consequences for the village, the Lord will demand explanation and possibly compensation for the lost prisoners. Someone within the community helped the poachers flee, which means trust has been broken, and the fugitives themselves face an uncertain fate, freedom purchased at the cost of exile, injury, and the looming threat of the dancing sickness in their apparent destination. As your group emerges from the forest edge, the village comes into view below, smoke rising from multiple chimneys into the clear winter sky. Other search parties are also returning, their body language suggesting similarly unsuccessful efforts. The bell has stopped ringing, the immediate emergency replaced by the need to return to normal routines. Your father sighs, his breath clouding before him. Well, that's that, he says pragmatically. They're in God's hands now, for better or worse. This fatalistic acceptance is characteristically medieval, acknowledging human limitations and surrendering outcomes to divine will. You've done what could be done. The rest belongs to forces beyond your control. Back in the village, the Reeve is collecting reports from each search party, his expression growing increasingly grim as the unanimous failure becomes clear. The fugitives have truly escaped, at least for now. The Lord will hear of this, he announces to the gathered men. Expect his steward by midday. Keep searching when you can, but return to your usual work. The fields won't plough themselves come spring. This practical reminder that life and work must continue regardless of unusual events disperses the crowd quickly. Medieval survival leaves little room for extended disruption of routine, even for significant incidents like an escape from justice. Your father heads toward home, where breakfast and chores await. You follow, your mind still partly in the forest, partly on the fugitives making their way toward a village gripped by terrifying sickness. Were they desperate enough to risk the dancing plague? Or did they have some other plan, some knowledge or destination not evident in their tracks? These questions fade as you enter the warmth of your hut, where the morning pottage steams in its pot and your mother looks up expectantly. No sign of them beyond the forest edge, your father reports, warming his hands by the fire. They're long gone by now, most likely. She nods, accepting this outcome as she accepts most of life's uncertainties. Sit and eat before it gets cold, she says practically. No sense chasing shadows on an empty stomach. The family gathers for the morning meal, the unusual start to the day already being absorbed into the necessary rhythm of medieval life. The poacher's escape will become a story told around winter fires, embellished with details imagined rather than observed, its meaning shaped by individual perspectives on justice, mercy, and the complex web of loyalties that bind and sometimes divide a village community. Outside, the sun climbs higher in a clear sky, promising a bright but bitterly cold day. Birds venture out cautiously, searching for food in the snow-covered landscape. The village gradually returns to its normal activities, women spinning and weaving, men repairing tools and tending livestock, children carrying water and gathering firewood under careful supervision. Medieval life continues its precarious balance between order and chaos, certainty and mystery, natural and supernatural. Another day of survival begins with all its challenges and small victories set against the backdrop of a world both simpler and more complex than modern minds often imagine. The Lord's steward arrives at midday, just as the reeve predicted. His horse's hooves break the crusted snow as he rides into the village centre, back straight, expression severe. Medieval authority moves with deliberate visibility, a reminder of power structures that shape every aspect of village life. Word spreads quickly, and villagers gather at a respectful distance to witness the official response to the escape. The steward dismounts stiffly, his fine wool cloak and leather boots marking him as distinctly separate from the homespun-clad peasants watching in wary silence. 3 prisoners escaped during the night, the reeve explains, standing before the steward with his cap in his hands, a posture of deference required by medieval social hierarchy. We searched at first light but found only tracks leading north toward Blackwood. The steward's face remains impassive. The Lord is most displeased, he says, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. Justice has been thwarted and his authority questioned. No one speaks. Medieval punishment often extends beyond individual wrongdoers to encompass entire communities deemed responsible for maintaining order. The question hanging in the frosty air is what form this collective punishment will take. The cost of the escaped prisoners will be divided among all households, the steward announces finally. 1 silver penny per family to be collected before the next full moon. A ripple of relief passes through the gathered villagers. Financial penalty is far preferable to physical punishment or increased labour service. Still, 1 silver penny represents a significant burden for families already stretching limited resources through the winter months. Additionally, the steward continues, the night watchman will receive 10 lashes for his negligence, and the village must provide 2 additional men for the Lord's household guard until the prisoners are recaptured. This harsher component of the punishment draws no visible reaction from the assembled villagers. Medieval faces learn early to hide thoughts that might be deemed rebellious or ungrateful. The designated watchman accepts his sentence with the same stoic resignation that characterises much of peasant response to authority. Not approval, but acknowledgement that resistance is both futile and dangerous. The steward departs soon after delivering his judgment, leaving the village to absorb and adjust to these new demands on its resources. The reeve calls for volunteers for the household guard. Young men without families are preferred, as their absence will cause less disruption to essential agricultural work. Your family returns home to discuss the financial penalty in private. 1 silver penny, the same coin your father spent on salt just days ago, must somehow be found again before the full moon. We can sell the honey, your mother suggests practically, and perhaps 1 of the rabbit furs. Your father nods, mentally calculating values against necessities. The small fishing net might bring something too. He adds, we can make another before spring. This pragmatic approach to crisis, inventorying available resources, identifying what can be sacrificed, planning for replacement, exemplifies medieval problem solving. Survival depends on both flexibility and foresight, the ability to meet immediate demands without compromising long-term viability. The conversation shifts to speculation about who might have helped the prisoners escape. This question has been circulating through the village all morning, suspicion falling on various households based on past friendships, family connections, or perceived sympathies. Best not to wonder aloud, your father cautions, his voice dropping despite the privacy of your home. Neighbours accusing neighbours leads nowhere good. He speaks from historical memory. Previous generations have witnessed how easily medieval communities can fracture under pressure, allegations of wrongdoing sometimes escalating to formal charges of more serious crimes. In a world without professional law enforcement or objective evidence, gathering, suspicion alone can destroy lives. The remainder of the day passes in necessary work, tending animals, checking stores, preparing food, mending tools and clothing. Medieval winter offers few idle hours, regardless of unusual events or additional burdens. The fundamental tasks of survival continue their relentless rhythm. By evening, the village has largely absorbed the morning's disruption. The watchman has received his punishment, administered publicly as both specific consequence and general warning. 2 young men have been selected for the Lord's Guard and will depart tomorrow with minimal belongings. Financial penalties have been acknowledged and planning for payment begun in each affected household. This rapid return to routine reflects medieval resilience, the capacity to endure hardship, adjust to new demands, and continue functioning despite constant challenges. It's not stoicism in the philosophical sense, but practical adaptation born of necessity. Those who cannot bend under pressure break, and broken people rarely survive medieval winters. As darkness falls once more, your family gathers around the hearth for the evening meal. Another simple pottage, though slightly thinner than yesterday's, as adjustments for the coming penalty payment have already begun. Food represents both immediate sustenance and potential trade value. Reducing consumption now means having something to sell later. Will we have enough? Your sister asks quietly, echoing her question from days before, but with new urgency given the additional financial burden. Your father glances at your mother before answering. We'll make enough, he says firmly. We always have. This confidence isn't baseless optimism, but hard-earned knowledge of family capability. Over generations, your ancestors have survived famine, plague, war, and countless winters. The current challenges are significant but not unprecedented in the long history of medieval peasant endurance. After the meal, instead of immediately preparing for sleep as usual, your father retrieves a small wooden box from beneath the straw mattress he shares with your mother. The box, one of the few items in the hut that might be considered decorative rather than purely functional. Rather decades ago, simple geometric patterns adorning its lid and sides. The family watches with interest as he opens it carefully. Inside lie the household's few treasures: a small silver cross that belonged to your grandmother, a smooth riverstone with a natural hole through its centre, believed to ward off nightmares, a tiny knife with an intricately carved bone handle, and a folded piece of parchment so old the creases have nearly worn through. Your father lifts out the parchment and gently unfolds it. Though you've seen it before on rare occasions, its appearance always creates a moment of reverence. Few peasant families possess any written document, making this one a manumission record freeing your great-grandfather from serfdom on another estate, particularly precious. Our family has not always lived here, your father begins, his voice taking on the rhythmic quality used for important oral histories. 6 generations ago, our ancestor Godwin worked land near Winchester, bound to the soil as a serf with no right to leave or change his lord. The familiar story unfolds, how Godwin saved the lord's young son from drowning in a spring flood, how the grateful nobleman granted freedom as reward, how the family eventually travelled north and settled in your current village as free tenants rather than bound serfs. Even in the hardest times, your father continues, carefully refolding the precious document, remember that our family carries this freedom. We may be poor in silver, but rich in choice and movement. Many cannot say the same. This perspective, highlighting relative privilege within an objectively difficult existence, offers powerful psychological sustenance. Medieval survival depends as much on mental resilience as physical endurance, on finding meaning and value that transcends immediate hardship. The small wooden box is returned to its hiding place, its contents once again concealed from casual observation. Such treasures, modest by noble standards but incalculably valuable to your family, represent both heritage and potential emergency resources. The silver cross, though cherished for its sentimental and spiritual significance, could be sold in truly desperate circumstances to buy food or medicine. This balance between preservation and pragmatism characterizes medieval relationship with possessions. Nothing is so sacred it cannot be sacrificed for survival if absolutely necessary. Nothing practical is discarded merely because it's old or worn. Everything serves multiple purposes, exists in multiple dimensions of value. As the evening deepens toward night, conversation dwindles and activities slow. Bodies tired from daily labor gradually arrange themselves around the central hearth, preparing for sleep's first phase. The fire is banked carefully, enough embers preserved to rekindle flame in the morning, but low enough to minimize the risk of sparks during unattended hours. Tonight, perhaps because of the day's events or the family history recently revisited, your thoughts turn toward the broader context of your medieval existence as sleep approaches. You live in a world defined by limits and governed by forces largely beyond individual control. Weather determines crop success or failure. Lords determine labor requirements and taxation levels. Church authorities shape moral understanding and community ritual. Diseases appear mysteriously and claim lives seemingly at random. Yet within these constraints, medieval people exercise remarkable agency and creativity. They develop sophisticated techniques for food preservation and production. They create tools precisely adapted to specific tasks. They establish complex social networks of mutual support and obligation. They transmit practical knowledge across generations through stories, demonstrations, and apprenticeships. This paradox, severely limited power combined with impressive adaptability, defines medieval existence. It produces both fatalism and ingenuity, resignation and innovation, acceptance and resistance. It shapes the medieval mind into something simultaneously practical and mystical, conventional and creative. Your own family embodies these contradictions. Your father accepts the Lord's authority without question, yet carefully guards the document proving your ancestors' freedom. Your mother recites Christian prayers faithfully while sharing folk wisdom about night spirits inherited from pagan forebears. You yourself work the land according to ancient patterns while constantly seeking small improvements in technique or tool design. This complexity extends throughout medieval society. The lord who demands labor service also provides protection from external threats. The church that collects tithes also distributes charity in times of greatest need. The community that enforces conformity also ensures no individual faces hardship entirely alone. Understanding these balanced tensions helps explain how medieval people survived conditions that might seem unbearable to modern sensibilities. Physical hardship was mitigated by social connection. Material poverty was offset by spiritual wealth. Limited political power was balanced by intimate knowledge of local environment and resources. As your consciousness drifts toward first sleep, these reflections merge with more immediate awareness, the warmth of family bodies nearby, the faint glow of banked embers, the familiar smells of wood smoke and straw and unwashed wool. Medieval sleep arrives differently than its modern counterpart, not as escape from daily reality, but as continuation, the mind and body remaining attuned to environment even in rest. Dreams come, populated with elements from both today's events and deeper medieval consciousness. You walk forest paths searching for escaped poachers, but find instead evidence of older presence, stone circles, ancient trees, patterns pressed into earth by generations of footsteps following the same routes. The Lord Steward appears, transformed into something half human and half beast, demanding payment in strange coins that burn when touched. Village neighbours shapeshift between familiar faces and unrecognisable forms, friend and stranger simultaneously. Middle night waking arrives with the usual brief clarity. The hut is quiet except for soft breathing and occasional animal movements. Outside, the winter night holds both mundane dangers and mysterious possibilities, separated by boundaries more permeable in medieval understanding than they will later become. You lie awake briefly, listening to these small sounds of nocturnal existence before second sleep reclaims consciousness. This time, dreams are gentler, simple scenes of spring planting, summer harvest, autumn preservation. The seasonal rhythm that governs medieval life provides its own form of security, the reliable cycle continuing despite individual hardships or specific years of plenty or scarcity. Dawn approaches gradually, the darkness outside thinning to grey before acquiring the faint golden quality that signals actual sunrise. Medieval bodies, attuned to these subtle light changes through necessity, begin stirring toward wakefulness without artificial prompting. Another day begins, similar to yesterday in its basic requirements, but distinct in its specific challenges and opportunities. This balance between repetition and variation characterizes medieval time perception. Days follow predictable patterns dictated by light, season, and social obligation, yet each brings unique combinations of weather, interaction, and circumstance. Your family rises to face these combined certainties and uncertainties with practiced efficiency. The fire is rekindled from preserved embers. Water is fetched from the well despite overnight ice formation. Animals receive minimal but adequate winter rations. Pottage is prepared from carefully measured ingredients, balancing immediate hunger against long-term supply maintenance. Medieval morning conversation focuses primarily on practical matters: which household member will handle which essential tasks, what resources require most urgent attention, how weather might impact planned activities. Yet beneath this pragmatic surface runs deeper awareness of community relationships, spiritual obligations, and historical continuity. "I'll check with Edwin about combining honey stores for market," your father says while pulling on patched leather boots. "He mentioned having some to sell yesterday. Together we might get a better price from the travelling merchant." This casual comment reflects sophisticated medieval economic strategy, recognizing how cooperation can improve bargaining position, identifying potential trading partners beyond immediate village boundaries, calculating relative advantages of different transaction approaches. "Take some dried apples to his wife," your mother suggests. She mentioned wanting some for her winter cough. This addition demonstrates the complex interdependence of medieval community. Gifts, trades, and sales blur together in relationships maintained through multiple forms of exchange. The apples represent simultaneously economic value, medicinal resource, social currency, and insurance against future need. I heard the priest say prayers for those with dancing sickness in Blackwood, your sister comments while carding wool. Does that mean it's spreading? The question introduces the day's underlying anxiety, neighbouring village affliction potentially approaching your own community. Medieval disease management relied heavily on isolation and prayer, with limited understanding of transmission mechanisms but practical recognition of contagion patterns. We've checked our grain, your father reminds her, and burned what looked suspicious. The rest we can do is pray and stay watchful. This response encapsulates medieval crisis management, practical precaution combined with spiritual appeal, neither replacing the other but working in tandem. Physical action demonstrates responsibility, prayer acknowledges limitation. Together they provide framework for facing threats beyond complete human control. As morning advances into full daylight, your family disperses to separate tasks, your father to consult with Edwin about honey sales, your mother and sister to continue wool processing, your younger brothers to help neighbours repair storm damage in exchange for future assistance. You are assigned to check snares and fishing lines, the daily protein search that might mean the difference between mere hunger and actual malnutrition. The snow crunches beneath your feet as you follow familiar paths through forest edge and along the partially frozen stream. Medieval winter offers strange beauty alongside its dangers. Crystalline formations decorating bare branches, animal tracks telling stories of nocturnal journeys, momentary sunbreaks creating diamond-like sparkle across untouched snowfields. Your mind wanders as you check each empty snare, resetting with fresh bait and adjusted positioning. You think about the escaped poachers, now presumably near or within Blackwood village. You wonder about the dancing sickness and whether prayers might actually protect against its spread. You calculate how many days until the silver penny must be paid and what items might need to be sold to raise the amount. These thoughts, practical, spiritual, social, flow together in medieval consciousness without artificial separation. The natural and supernatural occupy the same mental space. Economic concerns intertwine with community obligations. Personal survival connects directly to family and village welfare. At the final snare location, you find unexpected success. A large hare caught cleanly by the neck, its white winter coat stained red where the simple trap did its work. The meat will feed your family for 2 days at least, while the pelt adds to saleable resources for meeting the Lord's penalty payment. This small victory, more luck than skill, though proper snare placement certainly contributed, brings disproportionate satisfaction. Medieval existence magnifies such moments, each successful capture or harvest or crafted item representing not merely immediate benefit, but affirmation of continued survival ability. As you carefully remove the hair from the snare, a sense of connection flows between your hands and those of countless ancestors who performed identical actions in identical necessity. This continuity provides powerful psychological support. You are not alone in your struggles, but part of an unbroken human chain extending backward through generations who faced similar challenges and forward through descendants who will inherit your knowledge and resilience. Walking homeward with the hair secured to your belt, you notice how the winter sun has already begun its early descent toward the western horizon. Medieval winter days offer limited productive hours, requiring careful time management and prioritization. Activities demanding good visibility must be completed while light remains. Tasks possible by firelight are reserved for evening hours. The village comes into view, smoke rising from each dwelling into the clear afternoon sky. Despite its poverty and precariousness, the site evokes profound belonging. This small collection of humble structures represents security, identity, and continuity, concepts as vital to medieval well-being as physical necessities. Your family receives the heir with quiet appreciation rather than excessive celebration. Medieval emotions typically display moderation. Neither exaggerated joy nor dramatic despair serves survival purposes. The success is acknowledged, the resource appropriately valued, but work continues without interruption. The merchant comes tomorrow, your father informs you, while inspecting the hare's pelt. Edwin has agreed to combine honey supplies. With this fur added, we should raise half the payment amount at least. This planning illustrates medieval economic adaptation, identifying multiple small resources that together might meet larger obligations. No single item or activity provides complete security. Survival depends on diverse approaches and contingency awareness. As daylight fades toward evening, the family once again gathers around the central hearth. The hare simmers in the cooking pot, its rich aroma filling the small space. Everyone contributes to necessary tasks: mending clothing, carving wooden implements, processing wool, sorting dried herbs, while sharing observations from the day's separate activities. This evening routine represents medieval life's fundamental rhythm: dispersal for specialized work, followed by reconvening for shared sustenance and communication. The pattern balances individual contribution against collective benefit, autonomy against interdependence, specialized knowledge against common purpose. Darkness falls completely outside, bringing the familiar transition to nighttime consciousness. Medieval evenings without artificial light naturally encourage inward focus, quieter voices, smaller movements, greater attention to subtle sounds and sensations. The fire's flickering illumination creates both practical visibility and hypnotic visual interest, its dancing shadows performing on rough walls like primitive entertainment. As your family settles into sleep positions around the banked hearth, your thoughts drift toward the fundamental resilience that defines medieval survival. Despite harsh conditions, limited resources, rigid social structures, and constant physical challenges, people not only endure, but create meaning, beauty, and connection. They develop sophisticated agricultural techniques precisely adapted to local soil and climate conditions. They craft tools with remarkable ingenuity using available materials. They establish complex social networks balancing competition with cooperation. They transmit practical knowledge through generations while remaining adaptable to changing circumstances. This resilience, physical, psychological, social, spiritual, represents humanity's fundamental survival strength. The medieval period, often portrayed as uniformly dark and desperate, actually demonstrates incredible human capacity for adaptation and perseverance. As sleep approaches, your awareness gradually shifts from medieval hardship to modern comfort. The straw mattress beneath you transforms into a supportive memory foam surface. The smoky hut becomes a temperature-controlled bedroom. The constant background worry about food security fades into modern abundance. Yet something valuable remains from your medieval journey: appreciation for simple comforts, recognition of human adaptability, connection to historical continuity, and gratitude for both material and social resources that support well-being. Medieval people survived through community, knowledge, adaptability, and resilience, qualities that remain relevant across centuries of technological change. Their experience reminds us that human strength exists not despite limitation, but often because of it, constraints fostering creativity and challenges building capacity. As you drift towards sleep in your modern bed, far from the medieval hardships you've witnessed, perhaps you carry this wisdom forward, the recognition that comfort is relative, survival is collective, and resilience comes in many forms. Let the medieval rhythms of first sleep, gentle waking, and second sleep guide your own rest tonight. Like countless generations before, surrender to darkness, knowing that light will return, challenges will be met, and human ingenuity will continue finding paths through whatever difficulties tomorrow brings.